The following featured presentation is part of the Skywalking Network.
Power on.
It's showtime.
Boldly go where no one has gone before.
Warp 1, engage!
Welcome to a journey through time, space, and pop culture. A journey through a career in the special effects industry. Welcome to the Max EFX Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Toft. I'm here with Max. This is episode 9, Max's Boba Fett Bromance. Some of you may have seen Max in his Boba Fett costume from time to time at conventions. And recently, in the Bad Batch, we learned Boba Fett's real first name and perhaps a relationship to Omega. Plus, the Book of Boba Fett just wrapped filming, and now we are just approximately 6 months out. So we thought this might be a good time to discuss Max and Boba Fett. How you doing, Max?
I'm doing great, Kevin. It's great to hear you and great to be here.
Absolutely. I agree. I love this. It's been a while, and I think this is going to be a fun topic. It's not, obviously, if you listen to our first show, you know, Max and I met at a Star Trek convention, but immediately after that, and almost every other time after that, it was something to do with Max's Boba Fett costume. Our mutual friend, Dan, sometimes we would meet up and help Max get into and out of that thing, because it's, you know, although he can move very well in it, getting in and out of that thing is, you know, there's a lot.
It's definitely a two-man operation.
Right. And so I always thought that was great. And then going around the cons with you, and, you know, and making sure that people aren't sneaking up on you, or that you don't bump into somebody, or somebody has a question for you, all that stuff. So I thought we'd go back to the origins of all this, which some people might think is Empire Strikes Back. But technically, it was the Star Wars Holiday Special that came out in the 70s, really right after Star Wars first came out, or A New Hope, as some people might want to call it.
Yeah, definitely the Holiday Special was his original on-screen debut.
Right. But then, you know, then when that got reinforced in Empire, how did that hit you?
Well, first of all, you know, going back to the Holiday Special, like you were saying, I really was intrigued with the character, because he was super mysterious. He had all this cool looking armor, and that really powerful.
Yeah.
That really got me intrigued and everything.
Absolutely.
The rest of the Holiday Special, not so much. I'm being nice, not so much. But I loved it for Nelvana's animation of the first time we see Fett there. But then, you know, for me, I was working at the time down in Irvine, not too far from where you live, Kevin. And I was working for an aerospace company called Symbolic Displays Incorporated, and looking in the newspaper to find out when and where the closest big theater was going to be showing The Empire Strikes Back. I ended up going to Fashion Island.
Yes, I could have told you that.
Yeah, well, I am telling you that. I went to go see it at Fashion Island, and
Yes.
I went the first screening as soon as I could, right after work. And back in the day, kids, you didn't get to like pick your seat or buy your tickets in advance. You just had to show up and hope for the best.
Show up and line up.
Exactly. And I left work, got myself down to Fashion Island as quick as possible, and was able to secure tickets for myself and a buddy of mine. And we went and saw it that first evening, and I loved it. I mean, Empire is probably the best constructed of the movies of the original trilogy. And then having somebody as mysterious and cool and awesome looking as Fett, that just totally had me. You know, I mean, down to the way he walked and the way he moved. And I mean, I still remember that distinctive, there was like this ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching you would hear from his footsteps. And I found out later that Lucas really was inspired by the character, the man with no name, played by Clint Eastwood in a bunch of these spaghetti westerns. And because of that, he directed Ben Burt to make him sound like a gunslinger. And so he thought, well, what's a subtle way of doing that without being too over the top? And so he put the subtle sound effect of the sound of spurs, like you would hear, somebody have. So you hear this clink, clink, ka-ching, sound as Fett walks in. And it's really noticeable when Fett walks through the shot, and he's got the Bespin security guards escorting the frozen carbonite Honsicle to his ship.
Right.
And so I like I said, that just, I instantly fell in love with him. How about you, Kevin?
Well, yeah, I also, his ship, I thought, that whole sequence when, so first Vader talks to the bounty hunters, then, the story's proceeding, and then the Falcon sticks to the back of the Star Destroyer. Whoa. Okay. There's just so much happening really fast in there.
So
and
much
then,
goodness.
Yeah. And then they release the ship and he floats away in the trash, and you're thinking, yes, Han, that's freaking right. Yeah. And
what a great idea. Just float away with the garbage.
Yeah. And then, oh no, what's that? You see an extra set of engines start up, and you're like, oh, wow. And you get a glimpse of that ship. And it's like you said about the holiday special, mysterious intrigue, and I think that's what grabs you, right? I mean, it's this, and then when Cloud City, you come to find out it's him, but that whole, and you have to backtrack that in your head when you're watching it for the first time. You're like, oh, that was, that's, oh my God, he's tailing him, you're like, that's his ship, that's cool. I'm just glad it wasn't Dengar.
Oh God. Dengar is such a budget bounty hunter. I mean, oh my gosh.
I'm not scared of a guy wearing a diaper on his head, guys. I'm not.
At least it's not a used one.
It's a you don't know that. You don't know
that's true. It is awfully dirty and brown.
Yeah. They picked the right bounty hunter. Boss would have been freaky and scary, and IG-88. We now know from Mandalorian, we got to see IG-88 in action. I would say Boba Fett and IG-88. Well, we saw it when he was working with Mando. It's a lethal combination. As soon as you add Boba to the mix.
But it makes it, you can't help but laugh though when you find out that actually the real IG-88 was just made out of junk that they had laying around, and they literally bolted his feet to a piece of plywood that's out of the camera shots because it couldn't do anything other than turn its head.
Yeah, it just rotated its head and had some lights, right?
Yeah, and it had some red lights in its head. But I mean, going back to Fett and his design, Fett's costume was originally conceived by a combination of Joe Johnston and Ralph McQuarrie. And then after the initial design, I believe Joe Johnston pretty much did all the refinement to it, to its final version that we know and love. And so his costume is so cool and so unusual. At that time in Star Wars, we'd never seen anybody like this. And then you combine that with his ship called the Slave One, which was also designed by Nilo Rodis Janeiro. And in an interview, he said he was inspired by the shape of overhead street lamps. He had seen an overhead street lamp in the area driving home, and he said, that's an interesting shape. And so he took the basic shape of the street lamp and expounded upon it, and that became Slave One.
You see, kids, when you listen to the Max EFX podcast, you can learn something.
You learn a lot of history.
Well, and then also about the costume, I've seen a lot of the bounty hunters that we see in Empire Strikes Back. And you said, you're right, there's some budget bounty hunters back there. Even 4-LOM, it looks like a recycled C-3PO. But anyways, but of them, I've seen a lot of over the years now, thank you, Facebook, because there's groups that post the BTS behind the scenes shots of a white Boba Fett costume. So it looks to me like they put...
It's the original concept was going to be this white Fett.
Yeah, but at least, so when you look at all the bounty hunters in total from Empire, and you go, of them all, this is the one they put the most work into.
Of course, because he's the star character.
Yeah, well, I mean, it almost seems like the other bounty hunters might have been an afterthought based on what, your comment there and me making a joke about the diaper on the head. That it's like, well, did you think there was just going to be, I mean, I don't know if somebody out there knows the whole story, Max, maybe you do, but I would love to hear other stuff. I would like to hear from our fans out there, if anybody knows the backstory on whether there is on our Facebook page, on our group page, or do you know, Max? What?
Well, I know that there were some originally early inklings that Boba Fett's armor was that of leftover clone troopers. That was one of the early concept, thought-wise, story-wise.
But was he supposed to be the only one? Because it almost seems like they went, well, maybe one bounty hunter is not enough. Maybe we need a group of them.
Oh, no. I think there was always the thought of having multiple, but they weren't obviously all going to be wearing the same stuff. And, just story-wise and design-wise, it makes more sense. You're going to concentrate on somebody who's being written up in the script as being a very important, very, very notorious character. So you're going to spend the most amount of time on that character. Obviously, the other characters, like we talked about, Forlom and Zuckuss and the others, all the others, they're meant to be interesting, but they're not meant to take away the limelight from Boba Fett, who's meant to be the main character of the bounty hunters.
I've heard he was supposed to be an Imperial shock trooper. Have you heard that rumor?
I hadn't. I did see some other earlier designs, though, that had a definite sort of samurai influence in his helmet and other aspects of his costume, as well as, like, again, a sort of the overall writing persona was like the man with no name played by Clint Eastwood in those 60s and 70s era spaghetti westerns, even to the point that in a couple of the Man with No Name movies, he's wearing a brown serape, which is a sort of a Spanish cloak,
or like a poncho almost.
Yeah, like a poncho, and it's light brown with a medium brown stripe. And in some of the early concept art I saw of Fett, his cape that we all know he wears, his cape was light brown with a medium brown stripe in it, very much like the poncho that Clint Eastwood's character wore.
Hell about that.
Yeah.
That was my Ted Koppel impression. How about that? Okay. All right. So let's go back now to starting out, like back in college now. You were talking about, you've talked to us a little bit about your time early on, I think in some of the other podcasts, but let's quickly review.
Well, I first started getting the idea of making my Fett costume while I was going to college.
Yes. I remember now.
I went to college at Cerritos Community College, which is in the city of Norwalk in Southern California. And I went there because they were the only college I could find within my area that I was willing to travel to that taught industrial plastics. And turns out there was only 2 colleges in all of Southern California that taught anything about industrial plastics. And you would think, we use so much plastics in our daily lives. It's in our cars, it's in our homes, it's in our televisions, it's in everything. And yet there's only 2 schools that taught anything about it. Well, very luckily, I picked the right one in going to Cerritos Community College, because I first went there because I saw that they had a weekend class in mask making, because it was leading up to Halloween. And I took it. And in doing so, I found out my teacher, who was teaching the mask making class, a gentleman by the name of Terry Price. Well, Terry had gone to Long Beach University, where a lot of his friends had also gone, and they all ended up taking jobs working on the original Star Wars, building models like the Death Star and X-Wings and TIE Fighters and Vader's Fighter and Y-Wings and all sorts of cool vehicles that had been built for the very first Star Wars movie. For whatever reason, he decided not to go on like they did, but he was still in contact with his friends over there. And so I was taking classes with him, as well as I eventually also became his teacher's aide, because he saw my talent.
Teacher's pet.
Hell yeah. And with that teacher's pet came all sorts of great opportunities that other people wouldn't have gotten. And like I said, I decided, I really there was just something about Fett, the costume and everything. I wanted to make one for myself. And this is back in like the 80s, and nobody had ever done this sort of thing before.
Sure.
And so I'm doing this. I'm going to school. I'm working full time. I'm basically going to school at night because I'm working full time during the day. And turns out Terry had other connections with Star Wars other than just his friends who worked at ILM in its early days, where it was in Van Nuys.
Down here in LA,
but he knew a lot of the people at Don because of his mask making classes he taught. He also knew a lot of the people over at Don Post Costumes. And turns out that when Empire was coming out, because Don Post Costumes already had a contract with Lucasfilm making Star Wars masks, Vader masks, 3PO masks, and Stormtrooper helmets, And
right.
So when they were getting ready to release Empire, Lucasfilm approached Don Post saying, hey, we have this new movie coming out. I know you have the contract already and you're still going to continue making the stuff you already do. We have this new character who we think is going to be a big deal. Do you think you'd be interested in doing anything from him? And that him was Boba Fett. Lucasfilm sent Don Post almost a full Boba Fett costume, a helmet, a backpack, the chest armor, for them to examine and go, is there anything here that you think you might be able to reproduce and sell? Because he's going to be a big deal in the movie and everything. Don Post said no. because they were shown the parts of the movie that he was in, but that's all they saw. And they were like, well, he's barely, their basic logic was, well, he's barely in the movie. Why are we going to spend all this money doing something for someone who's barely in the movie? Boy, were they
lack of
wrong.
vision.
Yeah. You have a certain lack of vision.
Yes.
And, but they had taken a mold off of Fett's helmet, though.
Just for fun?
Just for fun, thinking, well, maybe, and they had taken a mold off of it.
Oh, no.
Okay. And my teacher, Terry, when they eventually decided they weren't going to do anything with Fett, my teacher, Terry, asked them, I said, hey, if you guys aren't going to do anything with this, can I have the helmet?
Oh.
The mold. And so they gave it to him. They gave this mold off of Fett's helmet to Terry. And Terry, knowing
how fortuitous.
Exactly. And Terry, knowing what a big Star Wars fan I am, like he is, and knowing that I like to make costume stuff and armor, he let me take 2 castings out of this mold from Don Post off of an original Fett helmet.
So so you've over the years you've told me you told me your helmet was a cast, but I don't think you ever told me the full story. So now I'm like sitting here freaking out because I'm like, is that the helmet you had when I met you?
Yes. And that's
like touching a piece of the movie, man, on your head.
Yeah. I mean, it is a copy out of the same mold that was taken off of the original Fett helmet used in Empire that Don Post had the opportunity to make way back in the day.
Does he still have that? Have you talked to him? The mold?
Oh, I haven't talked to Terry in many, many years. I haven't talked to him since at least the middle to late 80s, so I don't even know where he's at. I knew that he used to live in Whittier at the time when he was a teacher at Cerritos College, so I don't even know if he's still a teacher there. I kind of doubt it.
Well, you know why I'm asking, because it's like if he still has that mold and he hasn't burned it out, wowzers.
That mold was not good. The people at Don Post did not make a really good mold, because mold making techniques for something that big like a helmet were really pretty crude back then. This mold was literally, they took the helmet and they coated it in latex rubber, and then they took pieces of burlap fabric and pushed it into the latex rubber.
So it came through the other side?
Some of the burlap texture ended up on the inside of the latex, and then all of that was backed up with a plaster shell over that to keep the latex rubber, which was fairly thick. It was probably about 1/4 of an inch thick most places, but it still didn't make the best mold. After I got 2 castings out of that. One of the castings I cleaned up and fixed up, including having to do a fair amount of Bondo work here and there to little spots to fix things, like getting rid of the burlap texture and such, is the one that you saw me originally with and wearing. And it's the one that I have autographed by Jeremy Bulloch, who wore and was the original Boba Fett. And I don't wear that one anymore. That autographed one from Jeremy Bulloch is one of my prized Star Wars collection pieces, and it hangs on the wall in my home as a cherished object. Now, the second helmet casting, I did go back and I also cleaned it up and fixed it up, and I took a really good mold off of that. I took a proper silicone mold off of that, and then I did a fiberglass casting, and that's the helmet that I presently use and wear as part of my costume.
Got it. Is the mold still in good shape?
Yeah, the mold is still in good shape, and it's locked away, and nobody else has been allowed to use it in over 20 years. That mold is silicone with a fiberglass shell, and it's sitting in storage somewhere, and you'll never know where it is. Exactly. So, and that's how I ended up getting my original Fett helmet. And that I'm like, okay, I have the hardest part. The rest of it will be easy.
And also over the years, so let's talk about your first costume. I know over the years, correct me if I'm wrong, you told me that through trading, like people do in the industry, you acquired molds from other parts of your costume. Can you break that down?
No. What I did is I traded work for other people. Like my original jumpsuit, I could sew, but not to the level that I would have been happy with as far as making my jumpsuit and the leather pouches and such. But I had a friend of mine, and she was really good at sewing, and she had something that she wanted made out of plastic. And so I made these plastic bits for her. Remember the original TV show Battlestar Galactica, and they had that little robot dog called Muffet, who was a Daggett. Okay. She wanted to make herself a Daggett, a big full-size like plushie, but she couldn't figure out how to make the plastic bits. So I made the eye frames and mouthpieces for her Daggett. In exchange, she made me all the soft fabric parts for my Fett costume.
Okay, so there's the fabric, but there's shells and stuff. Now there's gauntlets. There's armor.
Well, and for the gauntlets, what I did is from examining photographs and looking at things I could find, like even the large 12-inch scale toy, horribly inaccurate. So you can't look at that toy, the original 12-inch toy that they made, because it's not accurate at all to the real suit. So I mostly went from photographs. They made a great big full-size, almost nearly full-size cardboard standee, which was great for paint reference and the gauntlets and other things. So I used a lot of that. I sculpted up my own gauntlet pieces, and then I vacuum formed them at school. Again, another one of the advantages of being the teacher's assistant is that he let me use all the equipment anytime I wanted to for anything I wanted to, as long as I was still doing all of my own school work, as well as helping out as being his teacher's aide. So, and that's how I was able to get my gauntlets made. And I was able to use the shop facilities for making other parts for like my backpack. My original backpack, I still have, and I actually have still used, the last time I ever wore my Fett costume, I was still wearing that original backpack that I made way back in the early 80s. And that original backpack, I had a friend who was a theater projectionist, and he, knowing that I was wanting to make a Fett costume, he got me, because sometimes films break in old-fashioned projectors. And he had a few frames from the movie, and it was during the Cloud City sequence, and there was a perfect frame of the back view of Fett's backpack from when he turns around after having his discussion with Vader about changing, the conditions of leaving Han and the Chewbacca and Leia and the Wookiee with Lando. As Vader walks out, Fett turns and follows him, and as he follows him, you see this perfect back shot of Fett's backpack. And this friend of mine who gave me the short piece of film that had broken, he gave me that piece of film, and there was this perfect frame, like a slide.
So what did you do? Did you take it and get it blown up?
I clipped out the one frame I wanted. I mounted it into an old-fashioned slide holder, and I had a slide projector at home, and I projected the slide onto the wall of my bedroom. I put up a piece of white paper on my sliding closet door, and I projected the Fett backpack on until it was what I felt would be roughly the right size for me to fit me. Again, I'm just, shooting in the dark, trying to figure out what the right size is. So I just basically projected it on the wall until I thought it was the right size. I would stand next to it thinking, does this look like it's the right size? Is it wide enough to fit me the way it fits him? And then once I was happy with it, with a pencil, I very carefully sketched it directly from the projection onto a piece of white paper. And then after that, I went back and refined it with a ruler and everything. And then I started building it. My original backpack is made out of PVC pipe, PVC fittings, and, plexiglass and sheet styrene. A part on my Fett backpack is an upside down plastic drinking cup, because it was the right shape for part of the missile thing on the center of his backpack.
My gosh.
The two thruster nozzles on the back on my original old backpack, those two thruster nozzles, I used a pair of short little stout drinking cups, because again, they were the right shape and size, and I didn't have to make them. And you
just had to cut them to fit. Yeah,
they were already the right height. I just had to fit them. And then the spheres that they went into, those were on my original first one. They were wooden balls that you would get, in a hardware store. At a
craft store?
Like a hardware store, like Home Depot. They'd be like the caps for like a balcony. Yeah. And they were wooden, and they had a rod on one side, and they were perfect in that way. And then I just went with a Dremel and carved the rest of the details into the wooden piece, and then painted and sanded and primered them so they didn't look like wood anymore,
So this was your first backpack, right?
Yeah. And it weighs, I was so proud of it, because also I made it so you could semi-disassemble it for ease of transport, like the missile part. I made it with a screw fitting from plumbing supplies, so you could unscrew the upper portion and take it out, and so it made it easier to store it and transport it and such. I wore the backpack I mounted backpack straps from like a school backpack on. I screwed the straps onto the backpack, and then there was the little clip down by my waistline, so I could put them up and over my shoulders and through the cloth bits, and then clip it to the sides. There was a whole bunch of engineering curve to figure out, well, how are you going to put this stuff on, and so you also don't notice things like the straps that are holding the backpack on, because this way, by using the backpack straps, I'm taking all the weight off of that piece of armor that goes around the neck from all the way around the front to the back. And again, this is in like the early 80s and such. I didn't finish the costume until 82, because I was again working full time, going to school full time, and I just had my weekends and whatnot to do it, and still having to deal with the rest of school.
What about the armor plates? How'd you get the size on that? How'd you get all the info on
again? Just by I took a piece of white paper, and I leaned up against it with my back up against it, and I traced the size of my chest, the slope of my shoulders and armholes, and I just from there, and then looking at photographs and looking at my body shape I had drawn, I then sketched out how big I thought the chest plates should be, again to fit me, so that it would look like his suit fitted to my size, my scale. And then I just made them out of thin sheet plastic, which I then took a heat gun to, and I heated up the plastic so it was soft, and I pushed it against my body, and this is warm sheets of plastic that I'm pushing against my chest and such. So I was wearing like 3 sweatshirts to act as insulation against myself. And so I just made all the bits like that. I did vacuum form my original first pair of gauntlets, and I did them all green, because in Empire, Fett's whole costume, his chest armor, his gauntlets, the backpack, all of the hard plastic armor parts of his costume are green. It isn't until later in Return of the Jedi it goes to the color scheme that most people are familiar with, which is, the ruddy brown gauntlets and the multicolored backpack and all of that stuff. For whatever reason, they decided to change it, probably because they thought the overall just green everywhere is a little boring, while the browns and multicolors is more.
Did anybody notice that it was boring in Empire? I would say zero.
Well, no, but I'm thinking they probably thought, as far as merchandising goes, all the olive green everywhere is a little like monotone, and they probably thought about. I'm just not. When everything we talked about in the beginning here, where we talked about Boba Fett and our first thoughts of it, none of them were around. Gosh, he's awfully monotone. No, but I'm assuming that probably came after Empire came out, and they're looking at merchandising and all that other stuff, and other people who are not involved in the film's production end up getting involved in things of that nature when it comes to merchandise and such.
We've got to make a toy out of this. What were you thinking?
Yeah. Like the infamous missile firing Boba Fett that never got made.
Yep. I remember I remember when that action figure came out, it was a definite, there wasn't even, usually when you went to the store, there was a bunch of Star Wars action figures, and you could convince your parents to get one. So you had to pick, right? And you're looking, Boba Fett was just like, oh, yoink. It's like, there was no thought. It was
exactly
instant.
Have to have that one.
Yeah. That was
have that one. Exactly. Yeah. And the funny thing is, the missile firing Boba Fett never even made it to the shelves. What had happened is that same year, Mattel had released a Battlestar Galactica toy of the Viper, their main spacecraft, pirate pilot craft, and they had made it where you could press a button in the nose of the ship, and it would fire a red missile out. Well, unfortunately, some child who was not being properly supervised was playing with it, put the Viper's nose in his mouth, and fired it. And the child choked.
Like you do.
Yeah. And the child choked on that missile. And after that, Kenner, who was the original manufacturer of the toys back in the day, and Lucasfilm decided, nope, we're not doing that. We don't want to have that giant publicity elephant land on our necks. So missile firing Boba Fett never happened. They made several prototypes, and they're incredibly valuable if you have an original, but it never made it to the shelves, no matter what somebody tells you. You can go and ask Steve Sansweet, who is a definitive expert in all things Star Wars merchandising. Yeah. And Steve will tell you missile firing Boba Fett was never, ever released to the shelves for that reason.
I did have the Viper. I had a Viper that shot, and then later my brother got one of the other toys that had it, and it shot, but what they did is that it only fired out like about half an inch.
It
got caught by the back. So I remember having both of those. It was interesting.
Yeah, because the first version, it actually fired all the way out, and then the revised version, it just fired out a little bit. So
so very fascinating.
And the very first time I wore my first costume was a little local convention in Orange County. There was a gentleman whose last name was Crawford, and he put on a series of little conventions called Fantasy Fair. And he put one on at this little hotel. The hotel is still there, but it's changed names since then. And the hotel was right off the 91 freeway. I think it was near State College Drive, which is what leads up to Cal State Fullerton. And he had one of his little Fantasy Fair conventions there. And this was before Jedi, but after Empire. And it was in 82. And I wore it there in its original. I even have a photograph of myself, and somebody photographed me, and I ended up being in an issue of Starlog magazine in that costume. So I have this really crude black and white photograph of myself in Starlog magazine. So I actually have proof of that first time wearing it. And I got second place in the costume contest. Guess what I got beat out by? You're never going to guess. You're never going to believe this.
I don't know. What'd you get? I might know.
What always beats armor?
Boobs.
Ta-da!
Yep.
I got beat out by a really, really beautiful girl as Elvira. She was dressed as Elvira.
Well, yes. Elvira is quite enchanting.
I mean, come on. But she didn't work for those boobs. You know,
You don't know that.
Come on, they were natural. Come on. Is that fair? She puts on a slinky black dress.
No, I know.
Showing her
You're
cleavage,
right.
and I spent hours and hours of time making my suit.
Yeah.
Come on, guys. That's why you need to have less straight heterosexual men being the judges. You need to have some more women and other people.
I gotcha.
Is it fair? Come on.
No, no, you're right. I mean, I've seen that happen before, and it's always a bummer because if they should kind of have two challenges or two divisions there, because if you're going to use that as your why I should win because I'm pretty and well built.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, they could have separated, given her like most beautiful, and mine could have been like most authentic.
Right. Right.
So,
well, see, but I thought you had more pull stuff on your costume that was pulled from original stuff.
No.
Did that ever happen?
No.
Did you ever upgrade?
No. Nope. My Fett helmet is the only thing I've ever had on any of my versions of my Fett costume that were, authentic and original. And then later when Jedi came out, that would be like my second version, because then I went back in and I repainted.
Was that
everything.
A repaint? Okay.
Yeah. I just like the toy.
You just repainted.
I made new gauntlets because my originals I had vacuum formed out of some thinner plastic, but I used what I could find in the shop.
Right.
And so they started breaking down and everything. They weren't made for a lot of wear and tear. So I made a new pair of gauntlets from the same molds. And then I repainted my backpack to the Jedi's color scheme, which is the ruddy brown primer, and the other bright colors, yellow and white and blue and a little green here and there. But yeah, and that was my second version.
And then there was there another refit when you got into bodybuilding a little bit?
Yeah, that was much later. Oh, and my original Fett boots where I found a pair of like what they used to call Beetle boots because they were very popular. Right. The Beatles wore them. They were these slip-on boots, and they had this oval on either side of the ankle, which was like black elastic, and it made it very easy to just pull the boots on. Well, that's the type of boots that Fett is really wearing in them, but they were custom made, and they were all, I didn't have that ability. So I found a pair of boots that were similar, and I took a saw and I sawed off the heel, and I glued on 2 layers of beach sandals, like flip-flops. So it would give me the thickness.
Yeah.
And then I painted my boots with paint, to make them gray with the dark gray and the black piping in between the 2 tones of gray. Those were my original boots. And then from my third version of Fett, from when I got into bodybuilding, because then I had to make the whole suit over again because it didn't fit my new larger self.
All the muscles.
Yeah. So I had to make new gauntlets, which was fine because, again, I needed new gauntlets anyway. And I vacuum formed them out of way thicker plastic, and they were bigger to fit me. The same thing with my chest pieces. For my chest pieces on my present suit, I made them out of 1/4 inch thick solid styrene plastic. And I cut the pieces purposely oversized, and doing the same thing I had done before. I heated up the plastic in our oven that we'd normally use for heating plastic for the vacuum former. And I was wearing 3 sweatshirts. Yeah. And then the outermost, the innermost sweatshirt was wet. So it would protect me.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. I take that back. The outermost sweatshirt was wet. Okay. And to protect me. Because then I literally put the piece of plastic. I'm wearing welding gloves as well to protect my hands. I put this piece of plastic on my chest, and I'm pressing it down in all the right places so it would take the shape. And because of the wet outside sweatshirt, you can see steam rising up off of it all.
Right.
But it served another purpose because it helped cool the plastic faster.
Right.
And so I did this for all of the 3 big pieces of the chest armor.
Okay.
And there's a little diamond plate piece that goes between the 2 pectoral plates, and that piece I just made out of sheet styrene and such. I made the new gauntlets.
Now wait, did both gauntlets
they're
silly
different.
string?
No.
The silly. Which version did you do the silly string?
Oh, the third version, my bigger self version is the silly string version, and wanting to add more features to the suit because yes, that the overhead periscope targeting thing could move down on all of my helmets, but I wanted to add something else that would make it different, and I thought. Back then you could buy what we used to call silly string all the time in like party stores and KB Toys and such. And I figured out a way that I machined a replacement tip for a can of silly string out of polyethylene plastic. I machined it on the lathe. And, a normal nipple on a can of silly string is meant so you can spray it out. Basically, it comes out of the can and goes out at a right angle to the center line of the can,
like any aerosol can.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I made a custom made tip that was bigger and longer that let the silly string go straight out, and then I figured out a way of fitting the canister of silly string into my left gauntlet, and then I put a button in the back of the gauntlet so that if you pressed on the button, it would compress the can of silly string
into the tip
in the gauntlet, and it would press it to the tip, releasing the silly string, and I could literally spray the silly string out in a straight line.
And this was to simulate
the grappling rope. He had originally the flamethrower in Empire, and there are even pictures or publicity photos showing him, using it, because the flamethrower would extend away from his gauntlet, away from his hand, about a foot out. And I've seen pictures of him at Elstree Studios out on the lawn, and you can see him just blowing this like 6 foot long, tongue of flame out of the gauntlet. And again, somebody stepped in going, do we really want our fans, especially the kids, wanting to start messing around with fire because of what we're showing them? They were very, very conscious about what kind of a role model are these characters going to be to the kids out there and to the audience. Because, originally the Star Wars movies were meant for kids. And so the flamethrower disappeared. And my first version, the green suit version, I had made a facsimile of the flamethrower. It didn't work. And I'd put like one little LED at the tip of it so it would light up. But that was it. So when I made my third version, I was doing the Return of the Jedi version where you see him fire a grappling rope, which ensnares Luke when they're on the sand skiff.
Right.
I put that was the purpose of the silly string, to sort of replicate that grappling line that he uses on Luke.
I tell you, it's a crowd pleaser. Every time you did that at a show, people absolutely went nuts.
That
was just.
I remember I was contacted by somebody who very well-to-do, who was throwing this big Star Wars themed party for their kid, and they hired me to come in my Fett costume. They paid me very nicely. Pictures and then seeing it in real life are 2 completely different things. And so it was the hit of the party when they saw me firing silly string out over the audience and at people, and they just loved it. Yeah, when I've done that at conventions, that people just love that. Well, it's like, remember that time when you and I were at Grauman's Chinese for
that was episode 2.
Yeah, for the opening of episode 2,
Attack of the Clones. Yeah,
and I think you were with me at the time. I was being interviewed by some local news channel about it because we were all there for the midnight opening and whatnot. And they didn't know that I could do this. And as a sign off, I raised up my gauntlet and pointed it at the camera, and they were just like, "Oh, he's just pretending." And that I let loose the silly string, and it flew straight into the camera lens.
Yep.
And TV cameras have this black shroud around them, which is to keep incidental light, from not getting to the lens. The silly string just piled up on the bottom of that black shroud, and it just built up like a mound. So it made like this natural wipeout, it just filled the camera viewing area. It didn't get on the lens, but it just filled the area, and it made like for a perfect, camera wipe to transition. It was so hilarious to see that. I wish I had a copy of that.
I think this is a good segue, because that night was special for another reason.
Yes.
You've met a lot of celebrities because of this costume, and that not in particular, if we want to just do that really quick and then go over other ones. But I think I'm going to take the lead on this one, because you came up after the fact.
Right.
I had gone up to meet some friends of mine who lived right there on Hollywood Boulevard to see Star Wars Attack of the Clones. So this is night of the show, and we're right on Hollywood Boulevard, right, really at the front of the line. And these two gentlemen walk up to us and say, "Oh, would you mind if we stood in line with you?" And we said, "Absolutely, Elijah Wood and Sean Astin. You may stand in line with us. Absolutely."
That was so cool, though, for them to come up and treat us like we're the celebrities, when it's like, no. Well, why are you guys having to be here and wait in line? You guys are celebrities.
Well, so we were there, and then not long after that, I started noticing there were a lot of costumed Star Wars people, mainly Imperials. And I started looking around, and I'm going, "Oh, this has to be 501st."
Yeah, and it was the 501st group.
Turned my head again, saw Boba Fett, and went, "I know who that is."
And it was
to you, tapped you on the shoulder. And then I said, "Come here." And I took you over, and both Sean and Elijah could not believe your costume. Yeah. They were absolutely taking pictures with it. They were asking you questions about it. They were blown away. Now, look, there's stormtroopers, there's Vaders, there's Imperial officers. Who are they talking to? They're talking to Boba Fett.
And then remember what happened, because it was you and me and Elijah and Sean, and then we had the TV people who came up to us.
Yes.
And they were wanting to talk to Sean and Elijah. And I remember Elijah saying that they would do an interview with them under one condition. And that one condition is that they wanted us, you and I, to be their escorts and security. So they asked for you and me to be with them. Otherwise, they would not be willing to do an interview.
And Sean had to hold my Parks lightsaber.
Yes. Yeah.
That was the other condition.
Yes. Because he wanted to have a cool toy to play with, of course.
At the time, there wasn't any lightsaber competition for Park sabers. At that time, they made the best, the toughest, the most durable.
Yeah, and they were all metal.
Yeah,
it wasn't like the plastic ones you could buy from Hasbro or anything like that, But yeah, so that was so awesome to have Sean Astin and Elijah Wood come up and ask if they can hang out with us.
Right, and interview you is what they before there was any cameras around. They were interviewing you about the costume. They couldn't believe it. But that wasn't the only celebrity interaction. There is a long list. Where do we go from here, Max? Where do you want to start?
I got to meet Jeremy Bulloch, the actor who portrayed Boba Fett originally, several times during my life. And the most memorable, I had two really memorable ones. The very, very first time I ever got to meet him, and that's when he autographed my helmet. They were going to be doing a series of events called the Men Behind the Masks Tour. And this very first one was held in Pasadena at the Pasadena Convention Center. Mm-hmm. And but it turned out to be I believe the only one they ended up doing. But anyways, Jeremy's giving his talk. He's up on stage. And Jeremy did not know that the organizer of the convention had asked me to come in my Fett costume And at the very end, when Jeremy is wrapping up his talk, I was supposed to go out on cue and grab him by the neck or by his shirt and drag him off stage with my gun at him, like, say, almost just like, okay, come on, the jig is up, you're going with me. And
surprise.
And he really was. He was a great sport about it. After we got off stage, I apologized profusely. I said to him, I hope I didn't ruin anything you were doing. Yes, they asked me to do this. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done this, but they asked me to do it. And it was asked by the organizer of the convention and everything. And he took it really well. He thought it was really funny. He says, well, you did it at the right time because I was wrapping up and I was about to walk off anyway. And he was super, super nice about it. And that's when I got up the courage and I asked him, and he autographed my helmet. He autographed my helmet on the left cheek of the helmet. Now, all the years that he used to go and do the conventions and everything, just because of speed, because he's sitting and the person above him is standing, he would almost always autograph it on the dome of the helmet. Right. So it's very unusual that he did mine on the cheek because I was standing next to him and he was standing with me. So that was the very first time I ever met Jeremy. But the other most notable one was, I believe, at Celebration 3, and Jeremy had his booth down autographing in the main convention floor, the dealer's room area. I was a member of the 501st at the time. My TK number was BH for Bounty Hunter 1131. I tried to get 1138, but it was already taken. So I took 1131, which was the closest I could come to it.
Yeah.
And several of my other friends in the 501st all had chipped in money, quite a bit of money and quite a bit of people, to then buy a plaque to indoctrinate and make Jeremy Bulloch an honorary member of the 501st. That's awesome. And I had the pleasure and honor of getting to give Mr. Bulloch his plaque at the convention. And it was a complete surprise to him. Him and his wife were both there, and they were like, oh, this is so cool. And I got to give him the plaque. And I have a picture of myself with Jeremy Bulloch with the plaque, presenting him the plaque.
Was there video of this? I feel like I've seen video of this.
I don't know if there's video, because if there is, I've seen
pictures. I've seen pictures.
But one of my good friends, Jeff Teal, he's the one who snapped the pictures of me giving the plaque to Jeremy, because Jeff was also one of the many people that had donated money to get the plaque made. And Jeff went with me to present it to him, and Jeff was dressed as Han Solo, so it was kind of appropriate, because I walked up with my hand around Jeff's shoulder as such, with my rifle up against his back, and as if I was bringing him
stick him up,
bringing him to Jeremy. And then we went ahead and gave him his plaque and told him what it was all about and everything. So,
well, that's awesome.
Yeah. And then another occasion, I got to meet Mr. Lucas himself. When Revenge of the Sith premiered, they did a huge exhibit of original costumes and some props at FIDM.
Here in Los Angeles,
yes,
right?
In downtown Los Angeles. And they were putting on an exhibition of original costumes from all of the Star Wars trilogy movies, and most notably from Revenge of the Sith. And the Fashion Institute of
Design and Merchandising.
That's it. Design and Merchandising, FIDM. Selected people got picked because of the quality of their costumes and how much, if they were, like we call a face character, how much did this person look like the face character is how people got picked.
That's hard to do.
And what's the quality of their costume? Yeah, of course. And luckily, me with my costume just being armor with a helmet, didn't matter what I looked like because the suit looked good. So I got picked. Right. I got picked to be Fett for this special one night only party that they threw for the opening of the event. And George Lucas was there, and several other celebrities from the movies were there. But it was Lucas I was really looking forward to, hoping I'd be able to get a picture of myself. I was very lucky. He happened to come through, and he seemed like in a good mood. And I took off my helmet while addressing the man because I didn't want to be disrespectful, and I asked him if I could please get a picture of myself with him, and he didn't say yes, he didn't say no, he said okay, and that was it. And one of my friends was able to snap a picture of it, and I have a picture of myself with Mr. Lucas.
All right, sure, Max. Faster and more intense.
Right. And a few years before that, there was a big Star Wars convention that was held up in San Francisco, and I remember going to it, and a friend of mine, a very beautiful young lady, was dressed as Slave Leia, and I got to meet Ralph McQuarrie was at the convention, and the actor who played General Veers, I think, is who it was. So I have a picture of myself.
Well, for people that don't know Ralph McQuarrie, I got to tell everybody quick. I'm being an artist. He was one of the concept artists for that. So he's like, that's like a big deal. That's why I made that noise when Max said that, because it's like, oh my gosh, he's such an inspiration, right?
Oh, definitely. I think it was Julian Glover who played Lieutenant or Captain. I can't remember his rank, but
yeah,
Veers.
Correct.
I'm not completely 100% it was him because my memory's a little foggy, and I'd have to look
whether it was him. That's definitely who played it, but you're not sure if it was that guy.
Yeah, okay, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I just mentioned, and I have these pictures, and we'll be posting these pictures that I'm talking about to our Max EFX group Facebook page so that people can see these different pictures over the years. We'll be posting these pictures from these events.
We'll make a nice folder like we do.
Yeah.
So you can see them all. Yep.
And so that was really cool. So, I got to meet Mr. Jeremy in costume. I met Jeremy
Mr.
in costume
Lucas,
several times. I got to meet, Ralph McQuarrie in costume. And then the highlight of all of them was getting to meet George Lucas. And then, of course, meeting, the two guys from the Lord of the Rings movies, Sean Astin and
Elijah Wood. Thank you.
Failing memory. Sucks being old.
A lot going on here, man.
Yeah.
A lot to keep in order.
So that was some of the highlights of getting to meet people in my costume, and as well as getting to do different events, because the 501st is a great organization.
They do good.
They do. They're, as they like to say, they're bad guys doing good. Because the 501st does tons of charity events, raising money mostly for children's charities. I remember doing a couple events with them at the Children's Hospital Los Angeles, where I brought my R2 with a bunch of the other people, and so it's always a lot of fun doing events for them, because that for the most part it's all children's charity stuff, which is my favorite. I got selected. They were doing a big event for the United States Post Office. Ooh. How many people can say they got to work for the post office and you weren't behind a counter pushing stamps?
You got to dress as Boba Fett and go postal?
Yes, in public, in front of the world famous Bromance Chinese Theater.
Again,
like you do. And they were promoting the upcoming release of a series of limited edition stamps that were going to be featuring different characters from the Star Wars universe. And one of those stamps was Boba Fett. And I was selected out of a bunch of people who had offered to do so. And I got picked. So I got to be there for this event and go up on stage. And as they were presenting these, stamps that were going to be made available, and a lot of, the local TV news press was all there and such. And as a really nice thing afterwards, whoever was running the event for the Postal Service, they had a list of everybody's names. And like about a month later, I got this big package in the mail. And this big package is this beautiful piece of framed artwork, which has all of the different stamps already mounted on it. And there's a little plaque at the bottom, and it says, basically, in thanks, for participating in our event. And it has my name on it. And they sent this to me and everybody who was involved as far as a costumed character. This was their nice little thank you, So there'll be pictures of that framed piece of artwork. We'll be posting as well up to the group as well. So
excellent.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's other events I've done, like I said, charity events, and I got to march in the Star Wars extravaganza in the Rose Parade, but not as Fett. But for that, I got to wear my Scout Trooper, my speeder bike armor, which that whole event they made a documentary out of, and it's called Star Warriors, and it's on the 6-disc Blu-ray set of the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy that was put out several years ago. There's a great documentary about the whole event, about bringing all these different Star Wars fans from all over the world together, and us meeting each other for the first time and practicing our marching, all leading up. And we only had 1 week to get together and practice our marching to then do the Rose Parade. Only 1 week. And I met a lot of really great people I'm still friends with from that event. There's a great group of guys from the Belgian garrison who have gotten to become very famous, because if any of you have gotten to go to one of the Star Wars celebrations, like the last 3 or 4, the Belgian garrison is really well known for making big, full-size set pieces. They made like the interior of Han's Millennium Falcon, full size. You can go and sit at the chessboard. They made, the bunker set from Return of the Jedi with a pair of scout, trooper speeders out front. You could go
speeder
bikes out in front of the bunker. They made a full size TIE fighter.
Whoa!
That they've taken to conventions and other big full size props. It's just so cool, some of the stuff that they've done. I'm still friends with those guys.
Cool.
There's a pair of twins who are from Italy. One is an artist and the other one is a tattoo artist. And I'm still friends with them. They were shocked to find out, and they became my fans because they were huge fans of Starship Trooper. And I told them, and they told me how that while they were there, they had made arrangements and they were buying a pair of original armor and suits to fit them. And these guys are both tall. They're like 6'2", 6'3", not as tall as you at 6'8", but they were tall and slender, and they were buying leftover costumes from Starship Trooper.
Sorry,
and
did you say these guys' names were Mario and Luigi?
No.
Okay, sorry.
No.
Not those two famous Italians?
No. And they bought the armor. They'd come into LA before the date they were supposed to, so they could do these things. And so they had the armor with them. And I said, "Oh, really? I sculpted that armor." And they were like, "No." So they had me autograph the inside of their armor.
I would, if I had some of that.
And so I mean, I got to meet so many wonderful friends through that. I mean, I already had many friends in the 501st here, just locally here in Southern California. Tim Knapp and his wife Christine Knapp, who still participate with the 501st, as well as they've worked on backstage in technical facilities on many of the different local, the Star Wars celebrations. They even got to go to Star Wars Europe, Star Wars Celebration Europe, because of this.
Whoa.
And of course, I'm friends with Albin Johnson, who created the 501st, and I just have so many good friends who I'm still super good friends with from having been in the 501st. My friend Lynn Perry, my friend Nikki Miyamoto, and her husband William are super good friends of mine. Mike McMaster, Mike Senna, Victor Franco, Chris Romines. I mean, so many wonderful people.
Long and distinguished list.
Who I'm still super good friends with, all from my participation in the 501st and Star Wars fandom. So I consider myself very, very lucky and very happy to have met and still be friends with all these wonderful people from my participation in Star Wars fandom.
I remember sneaking up on you at the NAMM show in your Boba Fett costume.
Yes, and NAMM is all musical stuff.
Yeah,
right?
The National Association of Music Merchants. So It was funny because I was there with some other friends of mine, and you were at a booth. You were working at a booth, but I had to take a minute and take the costume in. So this is because what if it's like some other Boba Fett, right? So I took a minute and I was doing like an inventory of the gauntlets, the backpack, okay, the helmet, And I'm going through everything. I go, it's Max. And I walked up to walked up behind you, tapped you on the shoulder, said something. You turned and you went, "Oh, hi, Kevin."
Yeah, that was the case of I was at I believe it was the Gibson's guitar booth, and I had gotten contacted from them having seen me at some other event, and they asked me if I'd be willing to do so. I said, well, yes, of course, but you guys are a licensee to Lucasfilm. And they said, oh yeah. I said, well, if you can get an okay from Lucasfilm, I'm more than happy to do so, but I can't really do it unless you get an okay from Gibson. And so they got an okay from Lucasfilm, and we did it. So I think there's one last story though. I think I really want to hear you tell Kevin about the time you were in your Vader costume and I was in my Fett.
Well, okay, so I'll break this down as quick as possible. So we were trying to, I think I was talking to you. I was like doing one of these, gosh, I wish I could cosplay at a convention. And you're like, just do it. Like, come on, let's just do it. I'm like, well, I'm too tall to be a stormtrooper. What am I going to be? It's like, and so, well, 6'8", you're Chewie or you're Vader, right?
Exactly. And I said, let's do Vader. Vader is badass.
Well, you said, but I think it was because I think you knew where you could get your hands on a few things.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So you helped me get my chest armor. There's somebody you knew that had a New Hope chest piece.
Yeah.
But it didn't have the shoulder bells. But you being you probably knew I can make those really fast.
And I did. And I made the shoulder bells and I made the chest armor. And then I got the chest box from someone else. Yes. And I knew where you could get that really bitchin' Don Post helmet, which is molded off of an original.
And we did. You took me you took me in Hollywood. We went and bought that. You had a source for somebody that had a belt buckle pull. You are the one that helped me get my lightsaber. There was somebody in the shop that had a Highland Flash, which was very close looking to the one that Vader had. Because you were at Icons, they had all the pieces to do replicas because they had the license. So we threw that together. So very quickly, we got a Darth Vader costume together.
That was pretty damn decent, I think.
Not bad. I mean, under scrutiny, people could shred it. But at first glance, and
it was certainly better than the average Vader you would see at a convention. And then the fact that you're freaking 6'8".
Yeah,
you didn't need any stilts or anything. And then everything else is like, you were really an impressive Vader.
Right. And it was cool because for some reason there weren't any other Vaders down there at this time. Like I said, this is a time at Comic-Con when the only slave Leia there was the one with us. Now they travel in herds. They kind of move like buffalo.
They're like cheerleaders. They only travel in huge groups.
Yeah, and there's large roaming packs of slave Leias, but this time there was only the one. So we rolled in there, and it was like paparazzi. Vision is already difficult in this thing. Now you put all these flash attachments going off. I couldn't see anything. Your costume is now, mine was heavy, a lot of fiberglass in that helmet. The guy that did the chest piece, you told me he went a little overboard on the fiberglass, and
it was a little too heavy,
over an inch of fiberglass.
Yeah, it was way too thick.
It was so here I'm lugging all this fiberglass. I can't see anything. If Dan wasn't there, I think there would have been people taken away in ambulances because it's a lot of
small children stepped on by Vader.
Right. So Dan kept everybody safe. He kept me upright, which was good too, because it's disoriented. If you can't see and you're in that thing, you're up
you get
and down.
Disoriented.
Yeah. It becomes very hard to tell which way is up, which is a common friendly phase. You hear people
we
say.
had a great time though.
It was a blast. Awesome. It was a blast. We looked great. We got pictures from that. We will post that. And it was probably one of the more fun Star Wars things I've got to do. You've got to do
because you got to participate for once.
I got to usually I was in a supporting role, which I'm quite happy being. Supporting Max is fine, helping him with the costume, keeping people off of him, helping people. It's also hard for Max to hear at a show in his helmet, as it was for me. So when you're doing one of these helmeted characters, I'm going to say right now, and see if you agree with me, I recommend having a non-costume tender.
Oh yeah, somebody be there alongside you, which is safety. Very much exactly the same thing that Disney does at the parks. If they send a character costume out, they always have someone to attend to them. I kind of fixed my helmet later in that the left-hand side earpiece, I very carefully dremeled a slot all the way out. So on that side, there's a slot all the way out, so I could hear at least through my left ear, because my right ear is covered up because I've got a microphone right there, so I can speak out, and then I've got a little amplifier on my belt so people can hear me. And then that little slot on the other side helps me hear. I mean, at least. And then, other improvements I later made. There's a little tiny fan in the forehead of my Fett costume. It doesn't do a lot, but you know what? It just enough. It keeps my visor from fogging up, and that little tiny bit of cooler, not cold, but cooler air blowing down over my face makes a big difference.
Well, actually, Matt, I don't know if you know this. I'm going to tell you this really quick, and you, the audience, get to hear this. It's a little
for the first time,
little inside conversation. Well, I'm just going to throw this out here. It's probably not the place to do it, but people might dig it. So, no, people might dig it. So
yeah,
I'll just tell
totally.
you. So in the paintball industry, playing paintball, you have to wear a mask because you lose parts of your body.
You don't want to get hit in the face.
So what happened over time, and you may, if you're already aware of this, fine. I'm going to say it, but they make now these fans that fit inside the headband of a paintball mask. So which means that it's a group of tiny fans that are made to go between a mask and your forehead that blow air straight down and keep the in paintball they have these acrylic or plastic
shields
lenses, that can take a paintball strike, but it's like Max was talking, you got to keep them from fogging up, right? It's not like a diving mask where you just spit in it and rub it and then you don't fog up. This is actually a really cool thing. If you didn't know this, these kind of things are out there. If you update or upgrade, and it has a little toggle switch, and I can tell you that running around in a paintball field, it will keep your lens clean and clear as far as fog goes. I don't know if have you seen those before?
I have.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, a buddy of mine gave me a set of those. He was going to put them in his stormtrooper helmet, and then he decided not to do it at all. So he was like, well, I bought this thing, here, you have it. So I think I'm going to do that probably on my next version of my Fett helmet.
Well, I'll testify it works. Right, I'll tell you that it's good. And not only that, it's nice having some cool air blowing around.
Oh, heck yeah.
In there.
Heck yeah. Well, with that being said, I think maybe we should wrap things up. Don't you think, Kev?
Let's wrap it up. All right.
Wrap it up. He's no good to me dead, and he's no good to me unless he's wrapped up.
Ooh, that was good. You sounded very Fett there.
He's no good to me dead.
Wow.
I practiced because he doesn't have a lot of lines in the first
very
film.
Fetting.
So
yes.
I just kept practice by saying his lines.
Can you do it Tamara Morrison style? Can you throw a little?
No.
Oh, darn it.
I don't do a New Zealand accent. So with that, we should say good night, Gracie.
All right. So I want to thank everybody for listening to this show and let everyone know we will be back next month and that we are part of the Skywalking Network. Skynet. There we go. You can also find other great shows like classic Marvel Star Wars comics. I love that one. Just saying.
Me too.
Also, Neverland Clubhouse. And also, actually, what am I saying? These are all great shows. And if you're not listening to them, you're missing out. So Neverland Clubhouse, awesome. The Resilience Squadron, also great. Star Wars Ologies, Talking Apes, Totally Tell Me Everything, Sabers and Spells, and the flagship show, Skywalking Through Neverland.
My favorite.
Yeah, I got it. It's how do you pick one? I mean, when they're on and they come up on Facebook, you're like, oh, cool, and you like listening, and you get sucked right in. All great shows on Skynet, folks. So
well, don't you also, Kevin, have another podcast you're going to be doing coming up soon about collecting? You need to tell everybody about.
Maybe it's going to be on YouTube, and maybe if you tune into Skywalking Through Neverland soon, you will get more information about that.
I heard it was
possibly on episode
333.
So we shall see about that, and hopefully people will tune in.
You've got Order 66. Well, go listen to episode 333.
Execute episode 333. Yes,
that's
absolutely. Right. I just want to let everybody know, if you haven't figured it out from earlier mentions in the show today, we have a Facebook group page, and we would love if you went there and liked us and shared it and told your friends.
Like us, you really like us.
Yes, do your best, Sally Field, and click that like button and share your friend. And if you leave us a message, we love to hear any comments you have, any fun posts. Do it. We love it. Absolutely love it. And if you feel the need to tweet us, we don't actually do the tweeting here at Skynet. We would recommend, if you want to reach us, go tweet at Skywalking Pod and use the hashtag Max EFX. So that's hashtag MAX EFX. And with that, I say until next time, folks, thank you for being with us. And Max, I'll be talking to you, I'm sure, very soon.
Very soon. And don't forget, he's no good to be dead.
That's perfect. Awesome.